Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here to speak today about flavour and aroma damage in bottle. Just before I begin, I'm a scientist, I'm not a gin expert. This presentation does include some factors about gin, but I hope it's of interest to you all. So, a little bit of an introduction to Campden BRI. I'm the Wines and Spirits Laboratory Manager for Campden BRI. We are a predominantly member-based company, and we offer technical and operational support to the food and drinks industry. We are split over 3 sites. We have 2 sites in the UK, one in Nutfield in Surrey, which is where I'm based. We perform the alcoholic drinks analysis and research. We have another site in the Cotswolds, where the food analysis and food research occurs, and then a 3rd site in Budapest in Hungary, and they also do food and mostly sensory analysis in the Budapest site. So some of the services that we provide to the industry, chemical analysis, sensory assessments, new product development work, shelf life assessments, legislation and regulatory advice, and much, much more. So we are continually looking into developing new opportunities for our clients, new services, new techniques, new analysis. Some of the recent methods that we have developed are natamycin, which is an antimicrobial agent. There was no method set up for this analysis previously, and we have a very good method development team at our site in Nutfield. So within 2 weeks we had a method up and running that we could offer to the trade. Another method that we developed was a method for haloanisols. So this includes your 2,4,6 trichloroanisole, also known as cork taint. And again, there was no method that we had set up, and very quickly we were able to develop a method for looking at the whole screen of anisols. There are many anisols that smell very similar to 2,4,6 trichloroanisole, but they might be the broma anisole, they might be a pentachloroanisole, similar compound, but by having a whole suite of them in the analysis, we can analyse them all in one go. Another method we developed was for looking at Brettanomyces, a spoilage yeast, and Brettanomyces is tricky to analyse for because there are no media specific for that yeast strain. So we actually looked at developing a method for a metabolite of the yeast. So we have a method for 4-ethylphenol, and we run this on one of our GCMS machines. Again, this method was developed very quickly, and all due to client demand for these methods. We are seeing an increasing number of issues in the wine and spirits industry recently. These aren't your classic faults, so they might not be your anisole, your cork taint, they might not be your Brett, they might be just a slight difference from one batch to another. You can't pick an exact fault, so this is a bit trickier to identify the problem. So, some clues that we have noticed when we've been investigating these differences in batches or slight differences in products are where products have been kept on open shelves, exposed to the light, exposed to whatever temperatures are in the store or at home or wherever. Products in warm environments, they can be very different to products kept under constant cool temperatures. Products that are shipped, especially across the equator. Some of the journey times from the southern hemisphere over to Europe are increasing dramatically as the shipping companies extend their journey times. And especially when crossing the equator, you can have temperatures, very, very high temperatures, which can cause damage to some of the products. Wines and delicate white spirits seem to be affected more, and gin is one of the most prone spirits to these kind of heat damage, light damage effects. White flint glass is another key factor. We found that a lot of the products we are seeing with differences happen to be in white flint glass bottles. So our challenge was to try and find some analytical techniques that we could use to confirm these changes or slight differences in batch and bottle, and also to try and make a protocol where we can test a new packaging or a new product to see if it will have any problems in the future before the product gets to market. some key factors affecting damage and premature aging of products. Excessive heat. I mentioned earlier that crossing the equator is, for any length of time, is not good for a product. So with excessive heat, we're meaning kind of temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius for any length of time. Excessively low temperatures, so this is below freezing. Anything below zero for, again, any length of time could cause damage to the products. And more importantly is the temperature fluctuation. If you have a constant kind of 20 degrees, that's generally pretty good for a product. If you've got highs and lows, so say for example an overnight temperature of freezing and a daytime temperature of 35 degrees, and this happens every day for a month or something, it's really going to destroy the product. It's not going to have a good effect at all. Movement and shaking of a product, you will have probably a small amount of oxygen in the headspace of the product, and as you're shaking this product around, say it's travelling on the road for a few thousand miles or something like that, the oxygen contact with the product will prematurely age that product. The bottle size is another key factor. Large bottles age much slower than small bottles, so that's something to think about. The fill height or ullage, so again that's the headspace within the bottle itself. If you have a large ullage, there's going to be more oxygen present, so again you're likely to see some premature aging of the product. Dissolved oxygen content linked with ullage and movement and shaking. We have more experience in the wine industry in this matter, and we know that it definitely causes problems in the wine industry. We are not aware of any research into the spirits industry, but there may be a link with premature aging and dissolved oxygen content. Closure, a very key factor. Is it a screw cap? Is it a stopper cork? Anywhere in between? The closure will dramatically affect the shelf life of a product and whether it's going to undergo any premature aging or not. And most importantly, for wines and white spirits, is the type of glass. As I briefly mentioned earlier, white flint glass is one of the worst. Brown glass would be wonderful if everyone had their product in brown glass. It would be very stable for a very long time. The brown glass doesn't let much UV light through to the product, and it's the UV light that causes a lot of damage to aromas and flavours within the product. Green glass, somewhere in between, and yes, white flint is pretty the worst. So, to summarise, a miniature white flint glass would be the worst kind of packaging that you could choose. So, looking at the protocol we developed for forcing the ageing of a product, so we can test within a much shorter time frame for our clients. So, we developed a method that's using a combination of different temperature set rooms, so all specially controlled, so some low temperatures, some high temperatures. Each of these rooms will have a automatic shaker in it, so to simulate what would happen on transit, and also they are fitted with different light conditions, so we can mimic kind of any environment really where the products may be sold. We worked very closely with clients on this to ensure that the forced ageing protocol we set up matched what was happening with real lifetime. So it was a very long project, as you can imagine. It took many months and years to develop. We performed chemical analysis and sensory analysis of the client's samples kept in the real lifetime with our forced ageing samples to ensure that everything matched very well. And basically, it depends what the product is. If the product's a wine, it's slightly different to if the product is a spirit, or if the product is a cocktail, or if the product is a beer or a cider or anything. But generally, our protocol is 15 days approximates to 6 months shelf life, or 30 days trial approximates to 12 months shelf life. But yeah, variable depending on the product exactly. Unfortunately, we are not permitted to release any more details about the method because it's confidential to Campden BRI, but I'd be happy to discuss anything later with anybody. So that's the forced ageing protocol. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the analytical techniques that we use to identify and confirm differences. So There are two options really. GCMS MS, which I've put up here. There is also LCMS MS. Now, LC is used more when there's a flavour problem. We don't seem to see as many flavour problems with spirits. So we tend to stick with the GCMS, which is very good on the aroma side of things, because we're looking at volatile compounds with a GC. GCMS MS stands for gas chromatography with mass spectrometer and another mass spectrometer. And we use two mass spectrometers to enable us to get down to very, very low limits of detection, and also to increase the proof positive identification of compounds. So basically, the GC separates the compounds according to their molecular weight. The mass spec part of it breaks down these compounds into certain fragments, and each compound has a known breakdown pattern. We use the National Institute of Standards and Technologies database, which we have access to search for the breakdown patterns that we see against their database, and then we can confirm what the compounds we are detecting are. So the process of performing a GCMS, basically the volatiles are extracted from the headspace of a vial, and they are extracted by solid phase microextraction, or SPME. That then leaves the compounds trapped onto a fibre, a SPME fibre. Then they are dissolved onto the GC by a direct injection. This produces a chromatogram, which we can overlay. This is an example of a chromatogram. So this is a control sample and a suspect sample, and this is a sample that we put through our forced aging protocol to demonstrate to you what it shows. Now, this is a direct overlay. You may not be able to see, there's a black and a blue trace. I have another slide later where I think you'll be able to see a little clearer, but from this direct overlay, you can't spot too many differences between the control and the suspect sample. But if you look at this one, okay, so at the bottom in the black trace, we have the control sample. And above in the blue line, you can see the suspect sample. Now, the suspect sample was the sample that we forced aged. So looking at the difference in the peak height and the peak area, you can clearly see that the control sample has much larger peaks than the suspect sample. So therefore, the suspect sample, or the forced aged sample, is much less complex. The intensity of the aromas is going to be less because the peaks are smaller, and there's probably slightly fewer compounds in the suspect sample now than there were in the control sample. So this is the chromatogram we get from the GC. The mass spec part of it is looking at more identifying the compounds. The next slide I have is an example of a table of a list of compounds that we have found using the NIST database with this sample. So we have retention times down the left-hand side, relative areas, and then the list of the major compounds that we have detected, and a comparative peak area. So we are comparing the blue aged sample with the black control sample, and all of the ones I've highlighted in yellow are all of the compounds that are higher in the control sample than the suspect sample. So this, basically this shows us that there's quite significant differences just within a 30-day aging period using our forced aging test. Anyway, thank you very much.